Hello, and welcome to Purple Week on FiveWhoFans. Purple, the week of death. Okay, so straight off the bat, this wasn't really my favourite episode by a mile, but it did feature my favourite gag of the last 5 years. Congratulations, Catherine Tregenna. But why wasn't this your most favourite episode by a mile, Richard B? I hear you cry. Well, I really like for once that we had an episode that focused on characters and precious little else. It's something I feel that the series as a whole, and especially the Doctor at this point, really needs a lot more of at the moment. In the last series I couldn't praise it enough for the fact that Clara, who was just very weak by the start of Series 8, had just developed through the series and become this generally quite interesting, complicated character who, you know, it was really interesting to see where she went and where her relationship with all the other people in the show was going. The few episodes that focus on her in particular, for instance, I think were some of the strongest that we had last year. The Doctor, on the other hand, I feel has suffered in the gulf between Series 8 and Series 9. He became, he started to adopt these very cool uncle vibes, appearing on the top of a tank, spouting out a wealth of bad puns. In this episode, where you hear the Doctor yell, "Line in the sand, no puns," you feel a little bit like this is a progression of the character from Series 8, as opposed to the character we've seen develop through Series 9. Like I say, there's definitely a degree of consistency between the character that we saw before and the character here, so long as you ignore the first 2 episodes of this series. I'm drifting. Okay, so building from last week's episode, a traditional and not particularly heavy rom. We go from that into an episode that focuses particularly heavily on characters. It's essentially a 2-character piece, albeit one bolstered by a +1 in the form of an almost unrecognisable Rufus Hound with some absolutely remarkable facial hair. Is that his? Bloody Nora, that was amazing. My personal issue with the episode is essentially a disconnect from its themes, essentially immortality. Ashildr, aka the Nightmare, aka Lady Me, aka, oh my god, it's Maisie Williams, you guys, you have to watch this one because Maisie Williams is in it. She becomes a sounding board for the Doctor essentially, as she recounts her losses, but there's something essentially wrong, I guess. Peter Capaldi has never really had a problem giving those long glances, those eyes, that lived-in face, everything about him that says, I've been there, I know that, I've lived through it. A lot has been said about her capability, and I don't doubt it, and essentially this role is standout compared to the background role she had in last week's episode. However, Maisie Williams' performance just doesn't really stand up to Peter Capaldi's. Similarly too, an issue less to do with the performance and more to do with the character, Ashildr's flip-flopping between wanting to leave with the Doctor, wanting to kill someone so she could leave with Lino, and then essentially eschewing her moral reprehensibility in order to become a vanguard against the fallout of the Doctor's machinations. Essentially becoming a caretaker of Earth, essentially, a bit like Rory or Captain Jack. But no, I just didn't buy it. It didn't really work for me, I'm sorry. It just felt a bit inconsistent. Having said that, there was one incredible standout moment of perhaps the last 2 years of Doctor Who, and that was Peter Capaldi's Mayfly speech. Heaven forbid it's the first moment in Doctor Who I think we can put a stamp on and say is a genuine Peter Capaldi moment. It's exceptional. I think perhaps there wasn't enough onus placed on it by the production or the music. It doesn't have all the hallmarks of a standout Matt Smith speech, for instance, but it was a very powerful performance and exceptionally well written. I will say that I did think this episode was almost impeccable, and words said by a much wiser person than I, definitely one of the most mature episodes of Doctor Who we've seen since The Girl Who Waited. Awards to Catherine Tregenna, more of that please, only the execution just felt a little bit off. Sorry. Tell us what you think on fivewf.co.uk, if there's still time, probably not, but you can still go there anyway. It's a great website, and visit aimlesswanderings.co.uk as well. It's also a great website. There's loads of free stuff on there. Just go now. In fact, don't finish In fact, don't bother watching the end of this video. I'm just going to say tra, and then there'll be end screen, and don't ignore that bit at the bottom. You know, ignore it. It's not important. Anyway, I'll talk later.
How important is it for you that the face is in the titles?
I don't understand.
The titles?
A band?
No, the titles. You know, with the theme.
The face?
Yeah, the face.
What, the tank thing?
Okay, we'll talk now. Do you know what I think one of the most reductive things is? It's the rhetoric of us versus them. Either you're with us or against us. Either you like Doctor Who or you don't. In circles, both in and around the show itself, more often than not with Stephen Moffat scoring pot shots against his detractors, and outside the show, inside the fan community, there seems to be, more and more, a dialogue of, if you don't like the show, don't watch the show. I'd argue that that probably is a very legitimate argument when it's scored against some of the more dismissive and destructive elements of the community. But to deny any level of valid criticism is just a bit, well, stupid. If you accept this quote from Stephen Moffat, for instance, that this lot, commenting that the Sonic sunglasses were a bad move, are essentially as backwards thinking as those who argued against the Doctor regenerating in the first place. You know, there's something that doesn't read, it just doesn't scan. You need only look back 5 years ago to the now almost forgotten Paradigm Daleks. At the time, they were praised, and nary a bad word was said about them in any Who-branded publication, and also in the press that was released prior to the episode as well. Now, on the other hand, it's almost completely accepted, unless you're Billy Tracy, that they're just a massive pile of poo. Actually, count me too. I really want to find out what happened to the Paradigm Daleks. I quite like them. It is all very subjective, isn't it? Stephen Moffat himself has previously been outspoken in his criticism of the mid to late 80s run of Doctor Who, and arguably that's a very popular position to hold. In particular, the Sixth Doctor's adventures are very widely derided. But to say that they're objectively bad or unwatchable is just bananas. No, arguably they're not immune from critique, but it's unfair to dismiss anyone holding a contrary view to the mass consensus. If that were the case, the BBC would have never released a DVD on Timelash of it being unfit for human consumption and have just, I don't know, gotten all the reels and placed them in a nearby wheelie bin or something. So, what merit does criticism actually have? None. Critical analysis on the scale that we commit it amounts to less than a drop in the ocean. We do it because it's something that we personally enthuse about. Doctor Who, writing, film, media production, these are all things that we're constantly engaged with. We're exactly the same with our own work. We strive to turn our eyes inward, not literally, that would be terrifying, adapt, find our strengths, weaknesses, and improve. Having said that, the only genuine criticism anyone on telly actually seems to care about is whether or not people are actually tuning in to watch their shows. You can't argue with the unblinking, unfeeling gaze of the masses. No, really, you can't. Not even the most savage put down by the most notorious critics can do anything to dent a television writer with the highest audience share for their time slot and the best audience appreciation scores. More on that another time though. For now, if we could take two things out of this. 1. Let's try not to make opinionated an ugly word. 2. Never make it personal. Criticism is something you do out of love, not out of malice.